Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm just going to pick up where John left off. I've got my own stories of space flight, my experiences I want to share with you. But of course, we're going to talk about the future here. We're going to talk about what you'll be doing in the 21st century era of space flight. Lots of exciting things out there, so let's get on with it. Oh, by the way, Sandra Bullock was supposed to be here to give this talk, but she asked me to step in for her today. She's busy out in Hollywood. So there I am on the International Space Station on my last trip up there. And John and I overlapped almost 10 years at NASA, so we have a lot of similar experiences. But my journey was somewhat like his, also a little bit different. My grandmother gave me this book called Space Flight when I was 5 years old, when I was growing up the road in Baltimore, Maryland. And the book is called Space Flight, The Coming Exploration of the Universe. No photos of space flight inside because, in fact, nobody had gone there yet to take a picture. So instead, there were just paintings of what a future space station might look like, little mini shuttle zipping away. And if you wanted to go on a spacewalk like John just told us about, you have to wear that rig over on the right there, really high-tech gear of 1960. So this was a book that really opened up my imagination to astronomy and space science and the idea of actually exploring space. The book went for 50 cents back when my grandmother gave it to me. You can see the cover price right there in the upper left corner. But she waited. She was a very smart shopper. She waited till it was reduced. You can see the label there. It was knocked down to a quarter. And I think, her idea was, I love my grandson. I'm going to spare no expense at inspiring him. By the time I was 10 years old, I had a lunchbox with John Glenn's space capsule on it that I was carrying to school. And by the time I was 10, I was going down to the rocket factory as a Cub Scout on a field trip in Baltimore, where the Martin Marietta Company was building these Titan rockets to propel the Gemini astronauts into space two at a time to rehearse moon landing techniques back in the middle of the 1960s. And I thought this was the coolest job ever. You got to go ride the most amazing machines ever built, and they were going to go places that no one had ever been. So that was the job that I sort of set my sights on at about the age of 10. By the time I was in high school, we were landing people on the moon for the first time, and I watched all the moonwalks with great interest. I learned that people like John Young here, saluting the flag on Apollo 16, most of them were test pilots, skilled aviators, and so I thought that would be the path that I would follow to get into space myself one day. So a few years later, I went to the Air Force Academy. I got a science degree there in 4 years, learned how to fly so I could become a test pilot one day, and I was assigned to fly these big B-52 bombers down in Texas. Taught me a lot about being a good crew member and a good leader. Came in very handy later on the space shuttle. And while I was flying the B-52 in Texas, NASA brought out a new spaceship to follow the Apollo ships, and it was called the Space Shuttle. And the new Space Shuttle had crews of 6, 7, sometimes even 8 astronauts, 2 test pilots, yes, but also a lot of scientists and engineers on board. And I knew that I loved science all the way through school and through college, so I thought, I'm going to go back to school and get more science education so I can apply for this job. So I went back to the University of Arizona, where I got my PhD in planetary science, studying asteroids. And while I was there, the space shuttle came to Tucson, Arizona, on my birthday in 1986. It pulled in for a refueling stop. That's the Columbia. And I had no idea, John, that I would be flying that ship 10 years later. And it was just a dream that I hoped I'd someday have a chance to realize, and little did I know that I'd actually get the chance to work on a real orbiter. That's the inside of the space shuttle, very complex. Of course, it's the 1970s technology that we got to experience. You're going to fly new and better spaceships. But I began to send in my application to NASA. Today, you would do it on the web. I used to send in a paper application, and after I sent in my first one, I got a postcard from NASA. Thank you very much for applying to the Astronaut Corps. We don't need you at this time, but if you're interested, try again the next time we call for volunteers. So I wasn't too discouraged. You can never make it on the first try. Sent it in again. 2 years later, rejected again. I didn't give up, though. I believed that I could make myself better. I could get myself better qualified. So I sent in my application a third time, and this time I went down to Houston, got an interview, and I was hired with the astronaut class of 1990, the 13th group of astronauts. And we began to go to astronaut school for an entire year to learn that shuttle inside out. So the message there, pretty simple, right? You don't give up the first time somebody says no to your dream. You make yourself better qualified. You become more determined, more persistent. And you find a way to go through or over or around any obstacle, and you keep applying until you get to do what you want to do. Don't let somebody else squelch your dream. Well, it took a year to go through astronaut school, but then all of us in my group, 23 of us, were ready to go to space. My first trip came in 1994 on the shuttle Endeavour. and I flew on a mission to planet Earth. And I don't have time today in our short talk to give you all the details of my 4 missions, so I'm going to focus on one of them, as John did. So this was my first launch on Endeavour to study the changing Earth with a space radar camera. Second flight, I was the chief scientist on board Endeavour for that mission to study our Earth. Third flight on Columbia. I got to fly that shuttle Columbia 10 years later to launch 2 science satellites into space, and I was the robot arm guy who retrieved one of the satellites from space after its job was done. And then finally, I got a chance to ride a 4th time on the shuttle Atlantis, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this mission to the space station, to put destiny in space. And what's destiny? Well, destiny is the laboratory that's at the center of the International Space Station. And you can see in the painting the shuttle Atlantis docked to the growing space station. And right above the shuttle's cargo bay there is the laboratory, the cylindrical module called Destiny, the U.S. science laboratory that's at the center of the International Space Station. Here's the group that's going to do that job. We had 5 of us on the crew. You see me on the left. I'm on my 4th trip. I'm going to lead the spacewalks on this flight. Next to me is Bob Kerbeam, who was a 2nd-time flyer from the Naval Academy, naval aviator, and he was going to be my fellow spacewalker. In the middle is Mark Polanski, an Air Force test pilot. He was our co-pilot on the ship. He had the job that I once wanted to do as a test pilot, and I became a scientist. And next to our rookie co-pilot there, Mark, is Marcia Ivins. Marcia is on her 5th trip, the most experienced astronaut on the entire crew, and she was our flight engineer and robot arm operator. And she was going to move that Destiny lab from the shuttle over to the station. And on the far right is my classmate and my commander on Atlantis, Ken Cockrell. He also commanded my Columbia flight. We were classmates, so we had worked together in space before. So here are the 5 of us going into orbit. So who is here from the state of Maryland? Raise your hands, please. Great. So some of you have been in Baltimore. Anybody here from Baltimore? A few of you, great. How about Washington, D.C. and Virginia? Raise your hands. I have a good sense of where you're from. So you all know the tremendous risks that we face when we go into space, right? Well, there was an even greater risk on this flight. 3 of the crew members are from Baltimore. Me, Bob Kerbeam next to me, and Marcia was born in Baltimore too. So think of the risk of sending 3 Baltimoreans into space at one time. The other 2 were there to make sure we didn't make a big error while we were on our way to space. So we're headed for the space station, right? We're going to put this laboratory into orbit, and we're going to blast off to do that job from the Kennedy Space Center. Raise your hand very high if you have seen the space station, the International Space Station. Okay, maybe 10% of the audience. I have a homework assignment for you. You can see the space station. You don't need binoculars. You don't need a telescope. All you have to do is step outside at the right time on a clear night. Your homework assignment is to go out and spot the space station by looking up spotthestation.nasa.gov. I'm giving you a head start. Tonight at 9:29 p.m., right here, you can look up in the sky to the west and see the space station going over at 20 degrees above the horizon, about that high above the horizon. You don't need a telescope. You don't need binoculars. It's the brightest star in the sky. If you see it blinking, it's an airliner. It's a steady white bright star, and it will course across the sky. You'll be able to brag that you saw 6 people up there and they were waving back at you. So that's your homework assignment. Well, we were going to launch to chase that space station on a February night in Florida, right at sundown, to line up with the orbit of the station. Over in Disney World, the sun is going down to the west in Orlando. Over in the east, the night is coming on over the Atlantic Ocean. And it's also the one night a month that February that the full moon was rising over the Atlantic Ocean in the east. So our friends and family saw this as we blasted into orbit. There's Atlantis and the full moon. Very special takeoff for us all. And it got even better. It got even better because at the top of our trajectory there, you see the Atlantis with the smoke cloud all the way back to the horizon, to the launch pad. We caught the rays of that setting sun, and we sent a shadow, that purple beam, all the way to the face of the full moon. So it's a remarkable optical illusion, if you will, a remarkable celestial lineup. This was a blessing from God to get this beautiful send-off like this. So I hold the record for the longest space shuttle flight ever flown, 135 out of all 135 missions. 18 days in space, the longest shuttle mission flown. I also have the record for the most beautiful space shuttle takeoff out of all 135, and now you've seen it too. So we're going to go to the space station, chase that orbiting outpost, and we're going to show you this movie about putting destiny in space. Now, this is really a shaky, rattly ride, as my friend described. It's like going down a dirt road in a pickup truck at about 50 miles an hour. Everything's shaking inside the cabin. You're hanging on for dear life as you scan the instruments for any problems. We roll over towards the right trajectory. Let's bring it down there, Brad. That's pretty good. There's my B-52 music to accompany us to space. Now, 2 minutes into the flight, those boosters are empty and they fall back into the atmosphere and get recycled back in the ocean. 8.5 minutes after launch, you're in orbit, a little lower on the volume, thanks. And we're in space and Marcia can let down her hair. We're chasing that space station. It's overhead 2 days later and we're gonna line up and dock with this growing outpost. There were 3 astronauts aboard looking at us, coming up to deliver that Destiny module in the cargo bay there. Commander's flying, Ken Cockrell lining up on the docking port. He flies manually the last few feet, and the 2 ships come together with a big jolt. Bang. And they're latched together, and now we have 8 crew members, 5 of us, 3 on the station, to put Destiny into place. And we had our first spacewalk on the 4th day of the flight. You see Bob and I putting on our long underwear, getting suited up there in the airlock. Mark Polanski helping us get dressed in our suits. We were outside to help Marcia on the robot arm maneuver that laboratory onto the space station. You see in the upper right, she's latched on to the big bus-sized lab. She's pulling it up out of the cargo bay. They gave her a whole 2.5 inches of space on either side to play with. She did a great job. You can see the lab coming into position here as we photographed it from outside. Next day, we were able to open the hatch on the Destiny. It's an American lab, so we wore American socks. Even the Russians wore Stars and Stripes socks into the new laboratory. We all streaked inside. Here's Sergei Krikalev from Russia doing a nice 4-point roll down the aisles of Destiny. Here's our expert commander, Ken Cockrell, doing a flip up there. I'm in the red shirt in the background there as we turned on all the lab systems. The next day, we were back outside for a second spacewalk. We opened up a new window on planet Earth, a science window to look down at our changing planet. Look at the gold visor on Bob. You can see the window in his helmet visor. Marcia's taking me on the robot arm there to my next job on the station. And over my shoulder here, you'll see the blue Earth, the black sky, even in daylight up there, 220 miles up. Back inside, Mark's getting a cardio workout on the bike. But how do you keep your stomach muscles toned up? Bowling for astronauts. And then Marcia's going to give us a little gymnastics demo. She's downstairs in the Atlantis. So 7 days with the station crew. They're saying goodbye to Marcia. That's Bill Shepard, the commander on the left, Sergei in the center, Yuri on the right. The last girl they would see for 5 weeks. Very sad. Parting as we pulled away. There's Atlantis firing her thruster jets to do a big half loop around the space station. You can see the Destiny lab at the front of the station there at the Earth's horizon. That solar panel is 240 feet across, and the 3 astronauts aboard were saying goodbye to us as we got dressed to come home. It was about 13 days in space. We're getting back into those launch and entry suits as Marcia is being born again right here through the neck ring of that suit, very tight fit. She's starting to feel the first twinges of gravity as we start to streak into the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound. And like John, we had to go to Florida, but it was rainy. We headed for California where the weather was better. Wheels down at 400 feet. Ken Cockrell flying manually now over that 3-mile-long runway. His goal is to touch down gently at 200 miles an hour, right on the 3-mile-long Edwards runway. Main gear touchdown, the drag chute comes out, as John described, and the cargo bay of Atlantis is empty. We had put Destiny in space. All of us in the front seats up there are given high fives on the success of our mission. My final experience in space. I had 4 great experiences on board the space shuttle. So let me wrap up with a couple of highlights about this mission and then catapult ourselves into the future. Bob Kirby, my spacewalking partner from Baltimore, did a great job. On our first spacewalk, he ran into a very serious problem. We were connecting up the cooling lines at the front of the space station's new laboratory, and one of them sprang a leak and began to jet toxic ammonia coolant out into the vacuum of space. It created a snowstorm of frozen ammonia crystals that stuck all over the front of his spacesuit. He didn't get on the radio and call Houston and say, "Houston, I have a problem." No, he remembered very coolly the emergency procedures that we had practiced. He bypassed that sticky valve that was stuck open, cut off the flow. Together, we were able to reattach the hose and bypass that bad valve, and then restore the flow of coolant. And so my partner here really saved the $1.4 billion Destiny laboratory on our first spacewalk of the mission. Really earned his paycheck that day. We had a great time for 19 hours outside. Here you see me on the space station. Notice the backpack, and John has described that life support system that keeps you alive out there. 8 hours of capacity, oxygen, water, battery power. Now at the bottom right of the picture, you see a little part of the backpack. That's the jetpack, the emergency jetpack that we wear in case you break your tethers and you drift away from the space station. You can actually pull out a little joystick and fly yourself back to the International Space Station. Who's seen the movie Gravity? Yeah. So if Sandra Bullock had had that little jetpack on her backpack, she would have flown right back into the arms of George Clooney, and the movie would have been over in 10 minutes. I don't know why the scriptwriters went the other way. But anyway, we've tested that on the ground and very thoroughly in space. Nobody's ever had to really use it in an emergency. But that was the peak moment of my astronaut career, was doing those spacewalks. In fact, I had one moment on the very pointy end of the space station there where I was by myself with 5 minutes to spare. I pivoted around the front end of the space station like this. Golden solar panel over my head like a windjammer, sailing ship, cruising silently around the planet. Down below my boots, 220 miles, the blue of the ocean, and that black space all around me. I could see 1,000 miles out to the horizon, and I'll tell you, it was just the most inspirational, teary-eyed moment that I've had in space. Back inside Destiny, that's the way it looked when it was brand new. It looks like this today. There's Karen Nyberg on the space station last year with a robonaut astronaut assistant. The space station now is complete with Destiny at the center. It's as big as a football field. It'll be up there for 15 more years as a fundamental science lab for improving our lives back here on Earth and testing ways to get farther out in space. And here's the crew of the space station. 6 of them up there right now. Rick and Steve are the 2 Americans, with Koichi, our Japanese friend, 3 Russians, Oleg, Alexander, and Mikhail. But how do they get there? Atlantis and the other shuttles are retired. We're renting Russian rockets right now. They fly out of Kazakhstan and take 3 people up and down to the space station, but the Russians charge us $71 million for each astronaut who flies. So we want to spend that money back here in the US, and that's why NASA is commercializing transport to the station. These are cargo rockets, the Falcon 9, the Antares, that launch cargo like FedEx or UPS to the station. They'll soon be among companies competing for business to take astronauts to the space station. And in about 3 more years, we'll see one of these companies, Boeing, Sierra Nevada, or SpaceX, get the contract from NASA to take astronauts to the space station from Cape Canaveral down in Florida. And I'm looking forward to that resumption of flights to the space station and then beyond. This is where all of you come in, because we've got the Orion spaceship being built to go to deep space. First test flight in December of this year. NASA hopes to fly a crew on it by around 2020, and it's going to be in service for about 30 years, like the shuttle. First, we'll go to the moon, back around the moon, where the Apollo astronauts explored. Why go there? Well, because in the craters at the bottom of the south pole of the moon, there's ice that we can use as a resource for drinking water and rocket fuel. Out on the asteroids, a few million miles from Earth, there is also water in the rocks on the asteroids. Here's some meteorite samples that tell us there's 10 or 20% water in asteroid rocks out there. Those can be our filling stations out there in deep space. Another great reason to go explore the asteroids, they come to visit us sometimes. You know, we've been affected all through Earth's history by asteroid impacts. If the dinosaurs had had a space program, they would still be here today. We need to be smarter than the dinosaurs and learning how to ward off a future asteroid strike from something like Chelyabinsk, that smaller asteroid you see there that hit us last year. NASA has a plan to go out with a robot and grab a small asteroid, learn how to maneuver it, learn how to nudge one off course, and then take advantage of those resources. With astronauts sampling the asteroid, they'll be able to start the process of extracting water and resources from the raw materials in space. And that'll get us out to Mars by around the early 2030s, around 2040 perhaps. We'll have humans following in the footsteps of our robots up there. We'll have astronaut explorers, we hope, on Mars by the mid-2030s, only a few thousand miles from the Martian surface. If there's water on this captured asteroid, Phobos, and its twin Deimos, we could use that as a refueling station around Mars. And then eventually we want to get down to the surface. Who's going to do the job? I'm retired from flying. The space station astronauts will be too old by then. So I'm looking to all of you. You're the future explorers out here, the next generation that's going to carry this dream forward. So if you study science and engineering in school and in college, embark on careers in science and engineering, stay physically fit, as John mentioned, and if you read all the books that your grandmothers give you, and if you finally follow that dream of yours to your future career, that dream is going to guide you through all the tough times in school and help you overcome those obstacles. And with that kind of determination, there's nothing that can turn you back. So with a little good luck and a lot of training and hard work, I'll be able to salute you in a few years as the very first Martians. Thank you very much.